to Dave Kinski, and he said Drew's back into the ICU up in Casper. They got him on a lot of oxygen. So he does have COVID, but so the rest of you know. But yeah, he's having a tough time.
I'm so sorry, and I hope that he recovers and recovers soon, all of that.
Welcome, everyone. It's 6 o'clock. Today is the 24th of November. We're going to begin our work session. We begin all of our work sessions with a public comment period. And so we ask those that are making public comments to give us their name, and then we'll give them 3 minutes. Now, I don't have a list, and so I'm assuming, Timberly, did you want to make public comments right now?
No, I don't have any public comment tonight.
Okay. Is there anyone in the public that would like to make any comments during the public comment period? All right. Welcome, Timberly, and we'll go ahead now with our work session. This is the legislative meet and greet. I believe present, I'll try to go through and see if I miss anybody, but I believe we have Representative Connolly, Sherwood, Andrews, Provenza, and Senators Rothfuss and Senator-elect Furphy. Did I miss any of the legislative elected officials? Welcome to all of you, and I believe our city manager will probably get us started with this. If not, we'll just open it up and go with what you have to do. Also, Janine, Senator Connolly, we may want to focus on her portion of this early because she just has had a long day and she's recovering from a procedure. So anyway, City Manager, did you want to start this off?
Sure, let me give the audio a test. Can everybody hear me okay?
I can. I think you're coming through great.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you. This is an odd forum for me, so bear with me. I thought, Mayor, if it's okay with you, maybe our guests would like to introduce themselves and tell us what districts they're representing, I guess. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Let's do that. Let's start with that. And let me just so we don't have everyone jumping in at once, let's start with our senators. Let's start with Senator Rothfuss. Is Chris? I don't see Chris on the. Chris Rothfuss, are you there? Let's go to Senator-elect Furphy. Do you want to introduce yourself? We'll come back to Chris when he comes on.
Sure. Dan Furphy. I'm currently House District 14, which Trey Sherwood is going to be taking over my old seat. And I've now been elected to Senate District 10. So, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to let you know, Senator Rothfuss just texted me that says he'll be there in 2 minutes, just so you know. Hi, I am Kathy Connolly. I am the minority floor leader of the House of Representatives, and I represent House District 13, which is kind of smack in the middle of Laramie in an inverted L. Happy to be here.
Welcome. Representative Sherwood.
Hello, thank you for having us this evening. I look forward to collaborating with you in this new role. I am serving House District 14, which is the northeast portion of our community and into the county.
Welcome. Senator Andrew, is it Andrew or Andrews on your Ocean?
It's Andrew.
Andrew, okay. We'll get that right. We had Andrews on our stuff, but it's Ocean Andrew. Welcome. Go ahead.
I'm Ocean Andrew, and I'm representing District 46, which is south of Grand and east of 15th in Laramie and most of southern Albany County.
Okay. Representative Provenza.
Hi, thank you for having me tonight. I'm Carly Provenza. I am representative-elect for House District 45. That's West Laramie, West Side Laramie, and about to 9th Street through a good chunk of town. And then there's a little piece over by I-80, 15th and Bill Nye, if anybody knows Bill Nye Avenue.
Okay. I don't see Chris on yet, so why don't we do this with the council?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. I've been in meetings all day. You're not Mr. Speaker, you're Mr. Mayor, and he said Windows decided to update right this second, and it is the boss of his computer, so he'll be on as soon as he can.
Kathy, while we're doing that, we're just going to have the council introduce themselves briefly, just tell us their name, what ward they represent, and we're going to start with our Vice Mayor Gabriel. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. East 15th Street, Ward 3, and I was reelected after my first term.
Okay. Councilor Weaver, are you present? Okay, let's go to Councilor Harrington.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brian Harrington. I represent Ward 1, which sort of overlaps House District 45 and then a small piece of Kathy's district as well.
Councilor Stalder.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Jessica Stalder. I'm City Council Ward 1, which is everything west of 9th Street.
Councilor Pierce.
Hi, everybody. Jane Pierce, Ward 2, sandwiched between 1 and 3, roughly between 9th and 15th, reelected for my third term.
Councilor O'Doherty.
I'm Erin O'Doherty. I represent Ward 3, which is the in-city part of House District 14 and then part of House District 46.
Okay. I don't believe Councilor McKinney's here, so we'll go to Councilor Schuster, who's in President of Council Chambers.
Thank you. Name's Brian Schuster, District 3 or Ward 3, 15th and East. They've talked about that. Working on my 5th term.
All right, and I am Mayor Joe Shumway. This is my 2nd term as mayor. I was elected the first time in 1999, and then I took a 2-year break where I ran for the House unsuccessfully, and then back to the council, and so I was there. Now, I believe Chris Rothfuss has joined us. Chris, just briefly introduce yourself and tell us, what your Senate district, or Senate, is it district?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Shumway. Hello, everyone. I'm Senator Chris Rothfuss. I represent Senate District 9, which is Laramie, west of 15th Street, plus a couple of other locations. Good to see everyone.
And welcome to all of you. We'll go back now to our city manager, and we'll jump into the conversation we're going to have tonight. Oh,
Hi, everybody.
Brian Harrington.
Yeah, we did Brian Harrington.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. Okay. Janine, go
Hello,
ahead.
everybody. I'm Janine Jordan. I'm the city manager. Audio still good?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, very good. So for our more seasoned members of the legislature, I'll start off by saying I know that you all have sat through this meeting many years. And so some of the content that I prepared for you is likely going to be very review in nature. But I wanted to explain a little bit of why I put the content together that I did for tonight. One is that we do have some new people, and we learned that as we have been introduced to Representative Sherwood, Andrew, and Provenza. And so with that in mind, coupled with our sort of odd situation we find ourselves in with COVID-19 and the recognition that it is sounding, to me at least, more and more likely that the legislature may sit later in this year than would be typical. My thought was, maybe we spend our time just sort of laying the groundwork of municipal government, what we do within your districts, and answer any questions that you have. And then last in the 5 sections is an opportunity to touch on just a few pieces of legislation that we are tracking and that we know will have significant effects for the city, and just put those kind of on your radar so that you can be watching for those as you work through your committee work in coming months, and then hopefully actually sit down to do some work in the legislature whenever it's determined that will occur. So what I would love to do is invite you as we go through. I'll stop after each section. There are 5 sections. I'll stop and ask for questions, but if you have a burning question in the meantime, just feel free to jump in and we'll go from there. Sound good? All right. So let me get my glasses on and get to the digital workbook. So my staff, I had to ask them to pull this digital workbook together late last week because I've been doing this for a long time and it never quite occurred to me that I wasn't going to be able to hand out a workbook to you all. So we converted it to digital. I told them old dogs can learn new tricks, but sometimes it takes us a while to figure out we need to. So our first section, I just wanted to introduce you to the city's workforce. If you're not already aware, the city of Laramie is the 4th largest employer in Albany County. I will admit to you, I didn't go back and verify those numbers, but that has been the case for many, many years. We do have one private employer that has been growing very rapidly, and I expect could bump up into the top 5 if they haven't already. But unless they've bumped up and I'm unaware of it in recent months, we are the 4th largest employer. We employ some 270-ish full-time benefited employees. And then we have another, depending on the time of year, we may have anywhere from a handful of part-time non-benefited folks up to over 100 in the summer when we hire on for our park activities and we step up our recreation activities, etc. So as I just moved through this booklet, at the button, and I'll tell you, much of the material that we're sharing with you tonight are excerpts from other documents that the city routinely publishes. So for that reason, unfortunately, the page numbering may be a little challenging for us as we follow through the presentation tonight. So if I am confusing you or you're not sure where we are, just let me know. So I'm looking right now at page 4 of 51, which is the ratio showing the number of full-time benefited employees charted against the number of residents served. And the reason that I share this chart with you is one, so that you know, we track very carefully the number of employees we have and manage our personnel budget very tightly, largely because we have to in a budget tight environment. But what has been a notable trend that has been persistent over the last 4 and 5 years is the fact at the bottom of page 4 of 51 that our community continues to grow while our workforce does not. And that's okay in some cases and to some point. Technology certainly allows us to be more efficient in the delivery of services and with the time of our staff members, but there is definitely a point where no amount of technology can save you, and you might just need more bodies to provide services. The city, of course, like every municipal government, is a customer service-driven organization. We're here to serve the residents of Laramie, and frankly, we serve many residents throughout Albany County as well, just because of the way our county is situated. So if you look at that ratio, you'll see we have right now 200 well, I want to point out one thing too. I said we have 270 some odd employees, but we have had a number of positions frozen for many, many years, 3 and 4 and 5 years, some of these positions. So what positions the council have authorized for us fall in the 270 realm, but what positions I've actually then authorized staff to hire for is only 255. And that's due to budget constraints and budget uncertainties. But what we do is we typically do our job with less than the resources the council have allocated to us, especially when budgets are uncertain. So then as you look at page 5 of 51, I wanted to just share with you the personnel costs as a percent of our budget. While we are a customer service driven organization, we also are responsible for a tremendous amount of capital construction. And so you can see what we spend on our employees as compared to what we spend as a whole to serve the community ranges typically somewhere between 15 and 20% depending on the amount of capital construction that we do in any given year. Fiscal 20, which of course is the year we just concluded, ending June 30th, we were at 15% personnel as a total of all of the city's spending. And then I'll just pop down to the next page, 6 of 51. We also track routinely our distribution of salary throughout our employee classes. And then we also look at how city salaries compare within our region. And you'll see that we are lagging a little bit behind, but we work really hard to keep that number up and to stay competitive so we can just really keep employed the best public servants we can find. So right now our average salary is $57,736 annually. And then I left for you on page 7 of 51, just sort of what we call our highlights. It's sort of an executive summary of the annual workforce report, and just gives you a peek at sort of what generation our employees are coming from, what we anticipate in terms of retirements, and what we're going to need to do to retain and recruit good workers to replace those retirees. And I won't read to you. I'll leave that to you. But that is the end of the first section. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those workforce questions. And I would offer as well, as you all digest this information, if you have follow-up questions at a later date, you can email me anytime. Or you can call me too. Or you can even stop by if we ever get to see each other in person again.
Janine, this is Trey. I heard that the city of Laramie had, I mean, I see here a 10-year comparison, you know, and a decrease in number of employees. If we would go back beyond just fiscal year 2010, I assume that would be a similar trend, that we continue to lose positions.
Yeah, Trey, I think that would be the case. Right now, we track that data. Frankly, I've tracked it as long as I've been with the city back to 2002. We just only publish a 10-year outlook. But what we've seen is city employees, and I've got another chart later in the presentation, but what we're seeing is we're seeing growth steadily in our community. And I think everybody knows that. You know, Laramie is unique as a Wyoming community. Many of our communities grow and retract, and some just steadily retract, where Laramie has steadily grown, and not, you know, wildly like, say, Gillette would, but we do grow at a pretty steady, like 1% per year rate. And then our ability to staff up hasn't necessarily been the case. And that's been the case all the way back to 2010. And I think it probably holds true prior to that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't hear any other questions. So I'll wait just a second more while I scan to the next section here, if you want to jump in. And I don't hear anything. So Mayor, I'm going to move to the second section if you're ready for that.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I wanted to I titled this section Prosperity and Opportunity. Because I wanted to be certain that everybody was aware, one, that the city has been really, really heavily involved in economic development for easily a decade, and certainly for many more decades than that. We have assumed a role of supporting our partners in the community that really are the specialists in economic development. Those partner agencies tend to be the Laramie Chamber Business Alliance, and also the Laramie Main Street Alliance. We work closely with the airport as well, recognizing they're an important asset as we strive to really develop and expand our local economy for the purposes of creating greater prosperity and more opportunity for our residents. So what we have done recently in this realm is last year complete what we call our Thrive Laramie Plan. This is a 10-year economic development strategy, and it includes actionable items that we intend to complete, really, and work toward in coming years. The City Council adopted the Thrive Laramie Plan after about a 9 or 10 month process that involved just a huge cross-section of folks from throughout the community. They adopted that plan in January. We started the work on it. So they adopted in January of 2020, and we did the work of it in the previous 9 months of 2019. So I've included for you in this packet the executive summary, which is 3 or 4 pages long. But I think all of you would probably find the entirety of this report really interesting. And so I've included the link there for you so that you can access the full report on the city's website. We try to approach this as a community in a way that we were really looking at the economic development strategy as aspirational and thinking, what do we as a community want our community to look like and feel like and be like in 10 years, not only in terms of jobs, but also in terms of recreational opportunities, in terms of the feel and the look of it, and just a really comprehensive strategy. This new Thrive Laramie report, or excuse me, action plan, I should say, it actually replaces a chapter in our comprehensive plan that was our previous economic development roadmap. So I know you all have probably already read through this. I'm going to move down to page 11 of 51. How we ended up deciding to break this out is with 3 overarching strategies, and then within each of those 3 strategy pillars, if you will, or tranches, there are specific individual goals that fall under each of the 3 areas. The first area was and I want to emphasize one thing about our planning process. We had over 50 people from the community involved, and we had hundreds of public comments. So I want to emphasize that this is not a top-down city down-driven plan. This was a plan that we wanted to find out what Laramie residents want and really be a bottom-up approach. So after many months of planning and getting all of that input, we arrived at this first strategy, which was to plan for population growth to 50,000 persons to support economic opportunity and enhance quality of life. Based on our historic growth trend, we see that if that growth trend continues, we will very likely be a city of 50,000. And so rather than be surprised by that growth or have that growth happen in an unplanned and potentially messy way, what we heard from the folks that we worked with was, we want to plan for that. If we're going to go to 50, we want to go there our way and not go there in an unplanned sort of fashion that may not really bring us the community that we want, nor give us the opportunity to preserve the community we have and the things about it that we love. Strategy 2 on the next page, 12 of 51, was that this notion that Laramie needs sort of a consistent and cohesive messaging. And to be candid with you, I kind of thought that was a really generic statement. But I think what we really heard from people is that Laramie is sort of this smorgasbord of a lot of different things. People have a lot of different ideas about what Laramie is. We have a lot of amazing attributes in this town. People that live here know of it. People that have lived here to come to school know of it. These are the same people that come back and want to be in Laramie. But we have not done a good idea of really identifying what makes our community special and then putting out a cohesive message across all of our organizations, from our major employers in the private industry and then across the public sector as well as the nonprofit sector. So we all need to come together and we need to arrive at sort of that vision and articulate it and then convey it to people in a consistent fashion. And then the third tranche, if you will, of area of improvement and areas we'd like to work on, our strategy 3, which would be revenue enhancements to support implementing this plan. And this is as old of an issue for our community. It probably predates every one of us on this call. Laramie is a community where we really just do not have a very large and expansive tax base, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and I'm sure you all know those, and we don't need to go into them. But a lot of times the financial resources we need to accomplish our goals and objectives is lacking. And so it was recognized by the group and the public comments that we really need to find a way to find revenue so that we can follow our dream, basically, because not every dream takes money, but a lot of them do, unfortunately. So that's the executive summary. I hope that you'll all have a chance to go look at the larger plan. I'll conclude this section just by mentioning that we adopted at the council level this plan in January, late January of 2020. And then of course, we all know what happened, 6 weeks later. So candidly, we're about a year behind on our implementation of our plan. We really had to set this aside, just like so many agencies have had to, as far as strategic planning, and deal with the immediacy of the COVID-19 situation. I'm actually in contact with some of the folks that we worked with on this plan to pull it together from my executive steering committee, and then also with our consultants to figure out, how do we make sure we don't lose sight of this? We've already sort of lost a year in our 10-year plan. So can we kind of pull it out, dust it off, do a refresh on it that takes into account the new world, the COVID situation, and kind of helps us chart a path forward since our first year really got, I don't know what to call it. It fell off, frankly. So that's something that we're thinking about right now, that I'm thinking about a lot, and that we'll be bringing in front of the council as we seat a new council and start talking about goals for 2021 with them in January. Any questions on that section?
Thank you, Janine. Let me ask about the 6-cent sales tax. How long or how many years do we have left to go before we meet the requirements that we last voted on, so that that revenue source may be available to the city in the future? That makes sense?
So I see that Malia's on the call. She will certainly correct me if I misspeak, but with the most recent capital facilities or tax, the 6 penny, Dan, excuse me, I think we easily have 7 or 8 years left before we recoup all of the revenue to fund the projects that were expected there. Malia just prepared bonds that council approved for some of the early projects that we will bond. You'll recall that was a really aggressive tax. And when I say aggressive, I mean large size. So it'll take us many years, 7, 8 years, unless we grow our way more quickly out of it, right?
Hi, Janine. Thank you for all of this information. I'm wondering if you have any idea how, we know that the economic impact of COVID has been substantial. But we're also, one thing I'm hearing a lot of is that we have more students in the high school because of, say, COVID refugees, people moving here. Do you have any indication of kind of how we're moving, with goal 1, 50,000 people by 2030, I'd be curious what that's looking like in relation to that, and if that is in fact occurring.
Thanks for that question. That's a good one. So as far as our population growth, all indicators right now show that we're continuing to grow. And I hear the same kind of rumors you do about COVID, refugees, et cetera. We'll probably know when the census is completed, whether what we think is happening is happening. And the Census Bureau also does estimates every year. And their estimates thus far, 9 years from the last census, have concurred with our own understanding of our population, and also have concurred with the population statistics coming out of the Wyoming Economic Analysis Division. So it'll be interesting to see what our census tells us after this 2020 collection. Candidly, I'm kind of worried about the 2020 census because for all the obvious reasons, this was a pretty tough year to try to conduct a census. College communities always have, maybe not a disadvantage, that may not be the right word, but they have a handicap when it comes to the way that census data is collected. And so Todd Fieser, the assistant city manager in my office, worked with UW and the Census Bureau. We hope that we got a good count, but communities all across the country are really concerned about whether the census will accurately reflect their population because of COVID. So we're keeping our fingers crossed and we're hoping that we did a good job, but that will be the definitive number, Carly, that we will look at to see if, the growth trend is escalating more quickly than we expected or not. As far as where we are population today, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but that Census Bureau website is really easy to navigate and it could pull it up for you if you'd like to pull that up. And I think, did I answer all your questions?
Janine, could I interject?
Okay, thanks. Yep.
Janine, I just wanted to add that 50,000 number was intended to be countywide, or like with not countywide, but sort of like the donut area around Laramie as well. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about that number.
Thank you, Councilor Harrington. That's an important clarification, and I should make sure I echo that. We really looked broadly, not just at the municipal boundary of Laramie, but what we call like the greater Laramie area, if we want to sound pretty grand about it. But yeah, that would incorporate really just everything around Laramie. So thanks. Okay. I don't see any other questions, so are we ready to move on to the next section? Looks like it. Okay, great. So the next section was intended to give you all just a quick look at the fiscal condition of the city. I included in here a cover memo from myself, a couple documents from the Wyoming Taxpayers Association and from the Wyoming County Commissioners Association that I thought were useful. And then the pages subsequent to that, and there are many, there's about 20. Let me minimize this. They are actually an excerpt from the adopted budget of the city of Laramie, which was adopted by the City Council in June. So I will not read those pages to you, but I provide them because I thought they gave a pretty good overview of where our revenue comes from, in what categories we make our we spend most of our money, that sort of thing. What I thought we would cover is really just the first few pages of this section. So I'm on page 15 of 51 in the cover memo, and I just want to point out a couple things. First of all, Wyoming is a little bit unique in how it treats city government compared to other states, that is. Our state is very restrictive by law, not really allowing municipalities and the local elected officials in those respective municipalities much authority or latitude to raise revenue or impose taxation at the local level. So for that reason, you say, well, then where do cities get their money? In Wyoming, cities get their money largely from you guys, from the legislature. So we routinely work with you and with other legislators and with the 5 elected officials at the state to seek appropriation of fiscal resources that are sufficient to kind of help shore up our operations. There's a payment called the direct distribution payment, which is literally like a cash payment that goes to cities. And then there is the mineral royalty capital grant program. And that's another big source of revenue that comes from the state to cities. There are some other minor programs which I didn't touch on here, and I'm sure you'll all be learning a lot about those. We use the direct distribution payment to really just provide things that are basic city services. We're talking police protection, fire suppression, street maintenance, managing stormwater, things of that nature. In the first part of this memo, I showed you what those direct distribution payments looked like in fiscal 17 as compared to fiscal 20, which ended June 30. And I just used a snapshot of cities. I think actually these might be what is called the first class cities, which are listed here. And there are 21 of them, I believe. The state adopted a way of calculating these payments some years ago that we continue to struggle with in Laramie. My sort of verbiage that I use to describe this payment calculation is I call it the volatility subsidy. It recalculates what sales tax was generated in a jurisdictional area each year, and then apportions monies out accordingly. And there are some other parameters that it measures in addition to sales tax collected year to year. But anyway, you'll all get to talk about this more than you probably ever want to. But what we've seen this formula for funding do is really reward the communities in the state that have volatile local economies. And those tend to be your mineral impacted industries, those communities that I referenced earlier in the discussion that can grow really quickly, but they can also retract very quickly, like if a coal mine shuts down or if there's some regulatory effect on natural gas that causes those industries to slow down. So for Laramie, what that means is, we don't have a lot of sales tax in this town compared to other cities, but what we do have remains relatively stable. And so what we're experiencing with this funding formula is really that we're receiving less and less funding because we're not volatile enough to get, rewarded for a downturn, so to speak, by getting more money because we had a bad year the previous year. And then the hardship component of those funds has also been eroding. And hardship historically was a payment the legislature made to cities like Laramie that had low sales tax opportunity, meaning we just don't have the taxable industry to generate much sales tax, so the legislature would offset that through additional funding. Well, that hardship funding has been kind of dwindling as well over time. So we're seeing this twofold effect on our distribution. Excuse me. So on page 16 of 51, I showed you what that direct distribution payment has looked like from fiscal 20 back for 5 years to fiscal 14, showing the direct distribution and then the hardship piece of it and showing Laramie's total. And so you can see in fiscal 20, we received $4.1 million to our general fund from the direct distribution, and that was the total amount. And as a percentage of all municipal funding that went out statewide, in fiscal 20, we received 12%. And you can see that that has sort of steadily declined from 14 to now 20. So that's of concern to us. We certainly don't want to take money away from our sister cities. We know that they need these resources just as much as we do. But it's pretty clear on our end that the formula is doing the things I've told you, and that Laramie is just really receiving a smaller and smaller piece of a pie that's getting smaller and smaller too over time. And then the last part of this memo I wanted to share is we've touched on. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Janine. Sorry to interrupt, but one thing I just wanted to point out for folks that haven't seen these budgets before is the idea that the direct distribution portion is only that. It's a portion that's intended to augment from the state level, because we really don't provide any flexibility to municipalities to raise their own funds, which was pointed out. But I think it's really important to stress the concept that Wyoming is relatively unique in how it collects sales tax and distributes sales tax out to municipalities based on the source of the sales. And in doing that, you have municipalities like Gillette, Pinedale, Casper, that receive a tremendous amount of revenue even before the direct distribution, and then still receive the direct distribution. So it's, I think, hard to appreciate how challenging it is for Laramie without seeing that full picture. And I wanted to make sure that those that are new to this discussion understand that on a per capita basis, we end up with roughly 1/3 of what Gillette has to spend. That's not trivial. That's not a small difference. 1/3 per capita is a big deal. And I know that we've got that data, and I think it would be useful to kind of make sure that the new legislators see that spreadsheet that we've all looked at a lot of times before. And maybe it's ahead, but if it is, my apologies. But I want to make sure that that's emphasized. Thanks, Janine.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. I think the chart you reference is in the pages of the budget document that I said I wouldn't cover. Yeah, I'll just show you guys where it is, kind of hit it so they can see what you're talking about. Thank you. That's an important point. And of course, I'm focusing on Laramie, so I appreciate the focus looking, at some of the other cities. Last but not least, I touched on personnel, and I touched on the fact that our community is growing. And so I just showed you in this memo what I call our customer service ratio, trended out a little differently in this line chart than you saw in the first section of the presentation. But what you can see if you look at the chart that has the blue line on it is right now, from fiscal 9 to fiscal 19, for those 10-year period, our customer service ratio just really increased. And what this means is we have one city employee serving on average more and more and more residents each year, which for any customer service driven organization, whether you're private or public sector, a chart like this starts to be very meaningful, like to the city manager and ultimately to the city council, because there's a point where people just can't provide good enough service without adequate time, resources, and bodies, frankly. So we track this closely and try really to manage and mitigate this ratio as we move forward. I wanted to show you page 17 and 18, and then we'll be pretty much done with this section. I sat in recently on a really nice presentation from the County Commissioners Association, so I pulled these two slides from Mr. Ryman. The first slide he actually pulled from the Taxpayers Association, but I thought for you all as statewide legislators, you might find this as interesting as I did. So the Taxpayers Association has shown what personal tax collections look like in Wyoming. And you see that kind of represented on the left-hand slide here. And all of these taxes are largely state taxes that you'll work with as you get into your legislative work this session. And then on the right-hand side of the slide, they've shown the cost of providing public services. And what I liked about it is they broke it down by the type of public service, whether it's local, whether it's K through 12 education, special districts, which an interesting point about Wyoming. I think the National League of Cities has data that shows that Wyoming has like more special districts, which are actually little governments, forms of government, than I think any nation in the state or something. It's pretty shocking. Anyway, so I like this slide, but what you can see is the disparity, right, between personal taxes collected from Wyoming residents at they estimated $3,180, and then the cost to provide those services being so much higher at $27,000 per resident. So an interesting slide, and these are things I'm sure Representative Connolly and Representative Furphy, I think you've both been on revenue, right? So you know these numbers inside and out. And then page 18 of 51 also shows a summary of taxes levied. And these are property taxes. Obviously, we're talking about valuation mills. You can see what percent of those taxes levied go to various major programs in local governments. So county governments receive 19.18% of those taxes. Municipal governments receive 2.22. And again, this is property, so this is not looking at all taxes, so keep that in mind. But I like this slide because I often encounter in my talks with people that people have a misperception thinking that their property tax is what funds city government, and that is just really not the case. The city receives, I think, 1.8 million per year total from all of our 8 mills levied. So property taxes in this state really go more largely to support schools and counties, and notably K through 12 education. And cities are a really small recipient of those funds. So if you have questions, you could jump in now, and I will go find the page number for the chart Chris was referencing, because it is embedded a little bit in these next 15 pages that we're not going to go over, but I invite you to let me know if you have questions in the future as you read through it. Okay, so the chart Chris had mentioned for us is on page 27 of 51. It's 25. And when I get these page numbers, you guys, I'm looking at the top of my browser, not at the bottom of the pages at the page numbers themselves. So I hope that's been, yeah, so at the top of my browser in the digital booklet, it says 27 of 51, but the bottom page number says 24 because we pulled it out of another document. Is this terribly confusing, or am I making sense? So what you can see if you get to that page is, for instance, in Goshen County, their per capita state sales tax that's shared with them by the state amounts to $183 per capita per person that lives in Goshen County. In Albany County, we receive $199 per person. And you contrast that, I'll just pull a couple out. Uinta is $236 per person. Lincoln is $320. And then, of course, if you scroll to the bottom, you see really the outliers in the data, which is Sublet and Converse, which receive $1,064 in Sublet per person and $1,547 per person in Converse. And this is the illustration of what Senator Rothfuss had been touching on. So any questions on the fiscal section?
Malia, did you have a question?
I just had a comment, Janine, that graph actually included direct distribution and the 4-cent sales tax, because a lot of people keep saying, hey, we get direct distribution, and so it compares both of them together to get the per capita.
Yeah, thanks, Malia. That's a great clarification. And that is noted below the chart, right? So thank you. Okay. So this is the issue that you'll probably hear a lot from us on every year. And we try not to become too annoying, but it's very important, as you can imagine. Chris and Kathy are like nodding, and Dan. Okay. If there are no, Trey, did you raise your hand? No? Okay. Okay. All right, I think we're ready to go to the next section then, if you don't have any questions on that one. And I'm just going to touch lightly here on this section because it's all there for you to read for yourself. But I was asked to include some information about Laramie's form of government. So Wyoming state statutes allow cities to have different forms of government, and the city of Laramie operates under a city manager, city council form of government. The information that I provided to you here is actually also an excerpt out of a document we prepare for our newly elected city council members. And it's an onboarding document that sort of is like everything you ever wanted to know about city government in general and Laramie city government specifically.
Excuse me.
Sorry?
Janine,
Yes.
what page are you on?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on page 39 of 51. So there are 4 or 5 pages here. Again, a quick excerpt from what goes to our newly elected councilors. A lot of narrative describing what the council does and what the city manager does. There's a Q&A that I included that comes from the National League of Cities and the International City and County Managers Association that I thought was kind of a handy Q&A tool with some references as well to other resources. But if you scroll down to page 46 of 51, I think this chart is probably the most succinct summary of all of that narrative information that you saw in the previous pages. And really the difference in a city manager, city council form of government, as opposed to where a mayor is elected, as in Cheyenne, we'll use them as an example, is in our form of government, the day-to-day administration of running the city is entrusted to the city manager, who is hired by the city council. So the manager focuses on administration and day-to-day business, and then the elected officials are able to focus their time on policy making and really deciding what the government will do, what the objectives will be. Then the manager working with the rest of the administrative staff to execute those decisions that the council have made about what public policies they would like to have in place. And I don't know what else to add in this section, but if there, for me, this is a tough, because obviously I live this every day. So I don't know what questions you all might have, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or the council would be, I'm sure, as well.
Could we start with Kathy Connolly? Kathy, did you have anything? Because I know your time may be limited with what you indicated at the beginning of the meeting. Did you have something you wanted to make comments on, or ask questions, or you know, give us your thoughts? Kathy, you're still muted, so hit *6. There you are. You're
Sorry, think I would have this down at 6 months in. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have any questions. Thanks, Janine, again, for the always thorough presentations. Just curious, always interested in, over the course of a year, if you found any kind of statutory impediments to doing the work that you do so well and things that you want help with from us in that regard.
Kathy, it's like I paid you to do a segue to the last section. I swear we didn't plan this. Okay, so yes, to answer your question, Representative Connolly, as we are preparing for the session, we're always watching what's happening in committee and we're tracking any bills that have been filed with LSO. Right now, we're tracking, myself and my department head team, about 30 bills that we think could have effect on city activities and business. However, if you go to the next section, I boiled this down to just 3 areas that I thought were really important out of the 30 bills we're tracking right now. And to be honest, by the time you guys get into session, that'll probably be closer to 60 or 70 bills. But I did drill down on 3 issues. And for those of you that have a longer tenure, these will be sort of well known to you. So I'm going to page 48 of 51. And this is titled Spring 21 Potential Legislation Affecting Municipal Government. So I'll touch briefly on these. The Wyoming retirement system manages pensions. There are 2 pensions for firefighters. One pension is known as Plan A, and that is the older of the 2 pensions. The other plan is known as Plan B. I said here at least 5 years, but to be honest, I think it goes back 7 or 8 years. I didn't go back and look it up, but for that many years, the Wyoming retirement system has been aware and has shared with the legislature, that the Plan A fire pension is in an upside down situation, basically, from an actuarial standpoint. Right now, liabilities are exceeding assets, and exacerbating that funding gap is the fact that some legislature, I think back in the 1970s, maybe 80s, by statute, encoded into law a 3% annual cost of living increase for beneficiaries. So you can imagine that makes this gap continue to grow between assets and liabilities. So from an actuarial standpoint, the pension's not sound. There's been discussion over the years about how to handle it. I am hearing right now, and I'm having a conference call tomorrow with my counterpart in Casper about this, but we understand that this is likely to come back this session, and that there may be a move afoot to have the cities, who are the employers of these firefighters, step up and make up the gap, the deficit in this pension fund. I can tell you this has come up off and on over the years, this notion of the cities funding the gap. And the numbers that I have seen, and I'll get newer ones tomorrow, but thus far, every number that I have seen is a number that is absolutely untenable to the city of Laramie with the minor resources that we have. The position that WAM has taken, as well as the affected cities, and I think from my professional point of view, I agree with, the council may feel differently, but that position has been that this pension was created by the state. It has been wholly managed by the state in its entirety, and that municipal taxpayers of Laramie just simply cannot afford to pay for whatever gap exists between assets and liabilities because of those management decisions and statutory cost of living increases. So we are really concerned, myself and Malia Brown, our chief operations officer, and our finance manager as well, all very concerned about that, given our fiscal position.
Right, thanks, Janine. I am familiar with this going forward, that there is actually it's our colleague, Representative Schwartz, out of Teton County, who sits on appropriations, who has taken this on and getting together a working group in order to address this. It is my understanding that the Firefighters A group has former Attorney General Pat Crank as their attorney. I've talked to my colleague and said, look, if I was Pat Crank, I'd say no way, right? That would just be my position. This was an agreement that was made. However, I do know that there is that working group. I will pass along to my colleague the very specific concerns of Laramie, but I would suggest that you get a hold of Mr. Craig and let him know very specifically the position of the city.
Okay.
Or what it would mean to the city. I guess you don't have to take a position at this point, what it would mean to the city if the obligation went to the city.
Right.
Kathy, how big of an obligation are we talking here? How much is it underfunded?
You know, to tell you the truth, Dan, I don't remember. But boy, it's an issue since if you remember, Glenn Moniz spoke about this quite eloquently when he was in the House even. So it's been an issue on the radar now for years. And he gave us the understanding of what that quid pro quo was, because he's under Firefighters Act as well as both a firefighter and in management. I think he was, but that quid pro quo was a pretty strong one back then. But I don't remember how much it is under, but everyone does agree that it is under.
Kathy, I appreciate that input. Like I said, I'm having a call tomorrow about this, so I should learn more. And Malia, if you remember what our last estimate of liability was, you're welcome to jump in. It's been a couple of years since I saw that number, and I don't want to misstate it. But it was a lot. It was many, many, many millions.
Janine, on that, and there's probably no legal record to point to, but do we have a concept of whether the state or the city is has the direct financial responsibility for making those payments? In other words, if it came to a lawsuit, who is the appropriate party to be filing the lawsuit against? Is it the city?
I am going to punt a titch on this if I don't see our city attorney, but I believe, so Senator Rothfuss, I think the question you're asking, if a beneficiary wanted to sue, who would they sue? Is that the question?
Correct.
Okay. I believe they would sue the state of Wyoming. Yeah.
That's my understanding too, Chris, is that this is an agreement with the state.
That's what I thought. It's the Wyoming retirement system. It's always been, and even though it's the payments have flowed through the city, I would expect any court filings or anything to be against the Wyoming retirement system, but I didn't know that. Do we know that, or do we think that out of curiosity?
Chris, my understanding, and this is just from a conversation with Andy about a bill and what he's working on right now, is that the obligation is with the state, but they're attempting to bring in the cities because the cities were the employers, to tell you the truth, right? The state wasn't the employers. The cities were the employers and had the benefit of those firefighters for those years. And so that's with the attempt of how can we solve this problem? And it's maybe bringing back the employer rather than the state that can't afford it.
Right.
For the rest of you, we just like chatting with each other.
And it's not the first nor the last time the state will have created a crisis and then tried to pawn that crisis off on some other party, such as a county or a city. So.
Okay. I'll go to the next topic here quickly. So the second topic I noted of these three, I think this group is fairly familiar with, so I am not going to spend a ton of time on this. And in part, I'll be honest and own up to the fact that this might be a little technically out of my wheelhouse as well. So if you want to learn more about it, I'm not the person to do that for you. But this next issue, again, I'm on page 48 of 51, is right now Bill 219. It is net metering for solar energy. This bill was in the last session and considered at that point in time, and I think considered by committee last year as well as moving out to the floor. It's been back in committee, and what it would do is just really affect residents who might be utilizing residential solar on their homes and really change the incentive structure for them and likely tamp down by disincentivizing them the use of solar energy in the state. I know that Representative soon-to-be Senator Furphy was on this committee. He probably could almost answer questions better than I could. But what I have included in the packet is a quick summary for you. I've also included for you the statement. It's the last pages of this packet of opposition to this bill that was submitted by the City and County's Environmental Advisory Commission. And then I should have included, but neglected to, the resolution passed by the City Council last year, also in opposition to this resolution, or excuse me, the resolution in opposition to this legislation. Forward. So Dan, I believe that this bill passed out of committee 2 weeks ago, but in a markedly different form than it started in the committee. And also our City Council member Aaron O'Doherty was present at that meeting. So Aaron, if you want to jump in, you're welcome to.
Yeah, that was quite a hot issue. I personally received well over 200 emails regarding it. But yes, it got changed at the last minute in committee. And here's how I think it's going to be resolved, and does make a lot of sense to me. Rather than these issues being decided by a legislative committee, what we passed, and will go on to both houses, is turning this matter over to the Public Service Commission. Let them analyze the utility company's argument and also resolve the issue of homeowners who have solar, et cetera, on their homes and are getting rebated by the utility companies. So I think that's how it's going to be resolved, is turned over to PSC.
Janine, do you have further items for the good of the group? I think
Janine appears to be.
I think she froze.
I think she is. All right. While we're waiting for Janine to come back, we've covered most of the pages that we have in this, and when she comes back, we'll have her jump in. Are there any questions that the council or that the elected state officials would like to throw out for discussion?
You're texting her.
Mayor?
Yes, Vice Mayor Gabriel.
I would like to maybe ask the veterans here on this, maybe Senator Rothfuss and Representative Conley, Representative Furphy, if you might just have a comment. You know, this is a terribly important concept about funding for schools. And the Boomerang recently had a column, and it said the Wyoming Legislative Service Office estimates that the school foundation program account will have a funding gap of over $550 million for 21-22 biennium. Increases to $915 million in 23-25 biennium. Do you guys have any idea how the legislature is going to tackle these huge deficits when it comes to school finance?
Kathy, you want to go first? You want me to?
Why don't you go first? And I'll do whatever that is. I'm not allowed sports metaphors, but I'll sweep.
Bat, clean up, be sweeper. There you go. You were a soccer player. Kathy's sweeping. Pat, it's a real challenge of a question because honestly, the legislature still does not want to believe it has to solve that problem, really. So it's still talking instead of acting. We're going through recalibration committee at this point in time to effectively determine what the cost of a high quality education is for the state of Wyoming. What we will come up with from our consultants really is that what we've been paying is about right. We'll probably end up with a recommendation of 50, 60, 70 million more a year, something along those lines realistically, is where we should be, which is then where you get the shortfall if you project based on what we're currently spending. And then the question is, how do we deal with that? Well, obviously there are two approaches and then a blended approach. One is raise additional revenue, another is draconian cuts, and the amount of cuts that would have to take place to meet that are substantial. 15, 20% of education has to go away. The only way you can do that really, and we talk about all the anecdotes, we talk about, half full school buses and boy, administrator salaries are too high and everything else. At the end of the day, the only thing that really matters are the number of teachers in classrooms or number of students in classrooms, that student teacher ratio, and then whether we pay legitimate wages to our teachers and are able to attract them. So anything we do that is a cut is effectively a cut to that ability of teachers to perform their job by increasing the classroom sizes. So that's one thing that's certainly being considered. We have recommendations for the number of teachers we need. Any cuts we make, I think it's important to know, will be unconstitutional. We've hired consultants. We pay them in accordance with Supreme Court decisions, the Campbell decisions, which tell us that we have to have independent cost-based analyses of what education in Wyoming costs. We do that every 5 years. We're doing it right now. We'll get that number, and the recommendation or the legislation that the legislature is likely to see is going to be below that value. So that basically says that just prima facie unconstitutional, the state will lose on that. And honestly, that's one of the things that I think is a likely outcome, is one way or another. It's likely the state ends up in court. So that's from the cut side. On the revenue side, we have been presented both on our education committee and on the recalibration committee with a variety of scenarios on what it would take to raise sufficient revenue. Again, this gets back to a lot of the topics that Representative Connolly and Senator-elect Furphy have looked at on the revenue committee, but it really takes a blend of different taxes probably to get to the level that we need to get through diversification. If you want a fully funded education system as we have now, it's going to take that full amount, which means increases to property tax, several mil, probably an increase in the valuation, and that still might not be enough. We have already intercepted some of the streams of federal mineral royalties that we have traditionally put into savings. We're holding them and spending them as a means of stopgap measure, but that is not sufficient. And again, there are legislators that kind of want a blend of those two things, but it's important to realize in the Campbell decisions, the court, because the Constitution says it, the court specifically said the legislature has the power to tax, and that shall be the solution. That there's no excuse for the legislature not to provide sufficient revenue to meet the needs of the education system, since it's a constitutional obligation. And the Wyoming legislature has just flat out fallen short on that. We have not done that job. If we do not settle on anything, if we come up with passing no bills, if we do nothing, in other words, and we fail, which is, again, a reasonably likely scenario because it's what we've done for a number of years, is battle, fail, and then do nothing. It gets fully funded out of the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account as a backstop. So that rainy day fund that we've been using, we are going to burn through really, really quickly if we don't come up with a solution. Because again, I think we've got about 1.5 or 1.6 billion in it right now, but we're projecting a burn this year that gets that down to maybe 1.3-ish billion. And the number you're reading is about 550 million that would be burned in 2 years if we don't solve it. So there's not a lot of runway ahead. It's time really for the legislature to step up and start solving problems instead of just shaking our fists and pretending we can cut our way out of it. We can't constitutionally cut our way out of this problem. It's impossible. So there's a long answer, and I'm sure Kathy has plenty of good material to add as well.
Thank you,
Senator thanks, Mr. Vice Mayor. I can just add a little bit more, and especially for new folks, that and Chris has touched on every one of these elements, but we have, in my mind, an absolutely beautiful Constitution. And our Constitution mandates that we have a high quality education for our students. It is kind of front and center, and that is actually a #1 obligation of our state. And that has been litigated. And what does that mean? And those are that kind of series of Campbell decisions that, again, Senator Rothfuss talked about. And the Wyoming Supreme Court has reiterated that, yes, that is an obligation. Right? And it is a firm obligation, no wishy-washiness there. And not only that the state legislature is obligated to take a look at what is the educational basket of goods, we call it this basket of goods, that is necessary to meet that obligation every 5 years. Right? We just can't do it once 20 years ago and call it done. We have to do it a minimum of every 5 years. And both Senator Rothfuss and I sit on that select committee for school finance recalibration right now. We're in that 5-year period. And know that your Albany County delegation, I mean, we fight to get on these committees because we know that it is best for our community that we do so. And, as strong advocates of education. And we just saw in Laramie, what do we have? 4 kids that just got, is it National Merit Scholarships? Right? I mean, my God, we should be so incredibly proud, right? 4 out of the 5 of them in the state. Know that those decisions that are based on our Constitution have meant that we have one of the best education systems in the nation. And, how do you kind of judge that? And it's, based on the scores that we see, these kind of NAEP scores that compare us elsewhere. And we just are, as much as, all of us would always like to see something better, and we can imagine it, know that we're doing really good in comparison with our competitors. And the reason for that, and again, Senator Rothfuss mentioned this, is because we take very seriously our obligations for kind of a low student-teacher ratio, being a small class size, and treating our teachers like professionals. As we start to erode those things, right, increasing class size, decreasing pay, we know what's going to happen, right? We're going to start looking like other places where our bragging rights of one of the best education systems in the nation will start to falter. Not only that, we've done some pretty incredible things which put us at the top of the nation. We do 100% reimbursement for special ed. Virtually no other state does that. And honestly, what that means is that our parents with kids who are getting special ed services can be as assured as possible that they're getting what they need. Elsewhere, when there isn't 100% reimbursement, what parents need to do to get it is sue, right? They're suing, right? And so you've only got the parents with the wherewithal to sue, and then the state ends up paying millions of dollars, right, for that particular kid or whatever. We don't do that, right? We have virtually no lawsuits by parents of kids in special ed, unlike, again, virtually any other state. So we could be really proud about that. Then going really quickly to recalibration right now, we just finished getting that consultants model. The consultants model honestly costs more than what we're paying right now by a little bit, puts out some things that we should be thinking about differently than what we are now to get even kind of better output, including attention to social, emotional, and behavioral issues in our schools and the need for more counselors, things like that we don't provide funding for right now. And also has a section that says you want the biggest bang for your buck. It is that we should have pre-K. We should have state-funded pre-K, which we do not right now. Okay, so we have all of that, and then we have a sentiment in the legislature to cut, right? To cut. And so no, we now have what we are mandated to have via the Campbell decisions and our Constitution, right? Which is a recalibration that says this is what it takes to meet your constitutional mandate. And then we have this push for cuts, which will mean that we go below our consultant's recommendation for meeting our constitutional mandate. And how will school districts respond to that, right? Because again, the expectation is if you cut, what it means is class sizes go up, salaries go down, and we are not meeting our constitutional obligation. So there is some sentiment, unlike in other recalibrations, that we couple this recalibration effort with revenue. And again, to point out that we have had specific streams of money that are or have been directed to the school foundation program or school capital construction. School capital construction, tens of millions of dollars each year was funded through COLE's bonus money. That's gone. That's zero. Tens of millions of dollars no longer exists. So school capital construction, which I think includes major maintenance, right, has to be funded in a completely different way. And then there's the school foundation program. School foundation program tends to be funded via mill levies on property. When assessed valuation goes down, there's the double or triple whammy. When your assessed valuation goes down, there's no longer the revenue streams that existed in the past. So there is some push that we couple recalibration with, again, some directed funding. And whether that be an increase in sales tax, an increase in property tax, I would argue for an increase in income tax that gets directed towards the school foundation program is still way up in the air. So then you have, again, you opened the door, Mr. Vice Mayor, but that's the really kind of like long answer to your question.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Senator-elect Furphy to wrap this portion up. Then we're going to go back to our city manager to wrap up the city topics that we're bringing forward to you. Senator-elect, did you have anything that you wanted to add to this conversation?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be extremely brief. Well, this applies not only to the schools, but also to the city. I've now been in a couple of meetings, and let me tell you, a lot of very conservative people were elected. And what they're saying is, before we talk taxes at all, we want to see the governor's cuts implemented and what that does. And then maybe see further cuts beyond that. So I'm just telling you, that is out there, and there's a lot of people who were elected on that platform. So it's a concern. Let me also say, one of the things I've learned is we call this rainy day funds. They're not really rainy day funds. They are the legislative balancing funds. So when we have agencies that have expenditures before they get the revenue coming in, they're using the LISRA, Stabilization Reserve Account. We can't count on that money to balance things and make our budget work. So I'm just telling you, be aware of that when people say, well, why don't you just use the 1.5 billion or whatever? We can't. We cannot do that. So I'll stop there. And if anyone has questions, I'm just telling you, it's going to be a concern. This is not going to be easy. Thank you.
Can we go back?
And Mr. Mayor, just before we jump on, To the next topic, Representative Furphy had asked a question before about firefighter A, and I quickly emailed a colleague. And here just are the facts to answer that question. Firefighter A runs out of money about 2026, annual cost of 18 million. Laramie's percentage of employer share at 18% would be, and Janine, you had it 3.2 million.
Thank you for that information. Okay, can we jump back to our city manager then? Do you want to continue on with the topics that you have for this group of legislators?
Yes, last of three legislative issues that I wanted to highlight for you, and that is a bill that came up last session. It was Bill 91 out of the House, if I remember correctly. And I'm looking right now at page 48 of 51 at the very bottom of that page. Basically what this bill does is it would prohibit cities from recovering any past due payments for municipal services. And when I say municipal services, I do not mean tax funded services like police protection. I mean our business services. So water utility, wastewater utility, etc. This bill was brought last session by a legislator out of Laramie County, if I remember correctly. It was defeated, but it did have a lot of support, and I think the defeat was narrow, if I remember correctly. So what I included for you all was just a quick summary of what the bill does there, and then also just put in the packet the very document that I shared with those of you that were in the session last session, summing up this issue and sharing with you the city's concern about a bill of this nature. Not only would this severely impact our business operations and basically force people who already pay their bills and pay on time to basically subsidize the unpaid debts of those who do not pay their city service bills, but it's also a severe preemption of local authority. And so I won't go into a lot of detail beyond that. I invite your questions, and I would just close up with saying we continue to really ask for your support for legislation that does not preempt local authority and that allows your local elected officials on the city council to come up with the best solutions for their community working with local residents. And that's all I have. Thank you. I'm ready for questions if you've got them.
Thank you. Okay, this is question time from anyone. Councillor Stalder, did you raise your hand or no? Okay. Councillor Doherty.
This, because it kind of relates to that last item, I wanted to talk more about the net metering effects. And one of the concerns brought by to the committee was that people with solar are subsidizing people that don't have solar, but then this bill says people with water who pay their water bills are subsidizing those who do not. And in the case of solar, people have a basic charge on their electric bill. In my case, I don't have solar, but in my case, it's most of my electric bill is connecting to the grid is the basic charge. So it would be a lot easier to just say, make that reflect the real cost of connecting to the grid. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I could. Just as maybe for the newer elected people, just for clarity's sake, you all may see Janine, and I just wanted to point out, based on the conversation about the city manager form of government, it is not uncommon for Janine to be speaking on behalf of the council or speaking to you all, and Malia and other sort of like the chief level folks for the city. So if Janine is speaking to you, it's often sort of with the endorsement of council for her to be doing that. So just if you do have conversations with her, just know that she is backed by council in those moments.
Okay, thank you. I will say this, when we work with the legislative team, it's a team that includes the council, but also staff. And we have had a great working relationship with our elected officials. We appreciate your input, keeping us abreast of what's going on, and also taking our concerns and trying to work through all of these different issues so that we have we come in with a realistic approach to what we can and what we can't do. We mentioned that we have 30, maybe growing to 50 issues that we're going to be very concerned about. You obviously know that you get updates on this, and we appreciate you doing this. There's so much that you have to deal with each session and throughout the year. We appreciate all the effort that you have in working with us and listening to our concerns and having us put together a clear picture for the different committees that you work with. And as we go over there, we've always appreciated how you have stepped up and worked with us and helped us through these different issues. We look forward to working with you in this coming session, whenever that is, and dealing with all the things that are coming up here. Okay, anyone else with anything before we wrap up this conversation?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Doherty.
I just want to comment, I'm really grateful to see all of our representatives and senators here. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know we all do. Thank you.
And we very much appreciate you and your dedication to the city and our community. And I know that when we're in session, I know that I have a couple of you on speed dial to answer questions or to get some understanding of what this would mean to Laramie. So thank you.
All right, it's been a great conversation. We appreciate your time. We appreciate the cooperative effort that we all work together. Janine, is there anything you want to say as we wrap this up for tonight?
No, thank you, Mayor. I just offered to the legislators again, if you have questions, whether prior to the session or during, you're always welcome to reach out to myself, to Malia Brown, our Chief Operating Officer, or to the Assistant City Manager, Todd Fieser. We'll get you information and help you as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, for the elected officials, we're going to go on to some more items that just apply only to the City Council, so you're welcome to zoom out. And we appreciate the time that you spent with us. You've been very, very good to work with us. Thank you all. Now,
thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Take care.
Thank you.
Let's just go to the next item on our schedule, which is City Council updates. And I'm going to start with our Vice Mayor Gabriel to give us any updates that you have.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended a couple of meetings via Zoom, the Parks Tree Rec Advisory Board, also the Tourism Board last week. It was interesting that the Tourism Board turned down the Turf Wars grant. It's the first of the year soccer tournament that generates a lot of activity at the IPF indoor practice facility. The group was probably going to be down about 50%, but they were asking for $2,500 to promote the event. But the Tourism Board took a look at their bottom line and said it looks like they have plenty of money to do things, and so they turned them down. Other than that, a couple of Zoom meetings, and that's all I have.
Okay. I don't believe, Councilor Weaver, have you joined us? Okay, then we'll go to Councilor Harrington.
Thank you, Mayor. Attended today the Pilot Hill board, the new board, met as a whole for the first time. It was seated last month, and they now will hold monthly meetings. A lot of the conversation today revolved around sort of what pieces of phase one, as far as the land use map and plan, they'll implement. It sounds like they're headed in the direction of a single trail, one that is mapped and in the other circuit of trails later, But that would be like sort of a from the schoolyard to the summit. That would be more interesting to ride, hike, ride on your horse, whatever non-motorized use you have, than the sort of old road that exists now that's open to the public. Beyond that, I attended some students at the lab school. I know many of you participated before. One of the classes reached back out to me to ask about sort of like our carbon neutral goals and some more specific things about waste, centering around sort of a similar plan to what the students are considering, or they're researching a similar plan to what Jackson has implemented with sort of a road to zero waste. They wanted to know about some of those pieces, and it was really convenient based on all the information Brooks and his team have provided over the last several months. I felt like I had all the answers, largely due to his work sessions. So they were excited to hear a bunch of that stuff. And I think that's about it. You all have in your mailboxes, if you haven't found them yet, you do have a newsletter from the Laramie Public Art Coalition that's worth giving a look. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Next, Councillor Stalder.
Thank you, Mayor. I had the airport board meeting on Friday. I wasn't able to attend the whole thing, but it's mostly terminal construction. Everything is wrapping up really nicely. I had the Board of Health this Thursday, and I think it was the shortest meeting we've ever had. Mostly what we go over at the Board of Health is like restaurant inspections, and there's not much of that going on right now from that standpoint. So not a whole lot to report.
Okay. Councillor Pierce.
Nothing to report, Mayor.
Councillor Doherty.
Some of you may have seen this on Facebook. There's a group of citizens that are coming up with a contest for Laramie lights to try to brighten people's spirits over the season. And they've asked if any city councilors are willing to be judges. And I wasn't sure how to handle that because I don't know about the quorum business if we're judges, but maybe we could take different categories so that we're not. But anyway, if anybody wants to be a judge, you can let Jackie Grimes know and I can give you her info. They're going to have several categories and it's going to be over a pretty long time period that you, like a week, that you would have time to go around and look at the lights. And so they're trying to get 100 people registered, and it would just be the addresses. And then we would ride around and look at lights and do some ranked choice voting. So let me know if you're interested, and then maybe someone like Nancy could school us on how we could all be judges for something, even though, I mean, the quorum concerns. Thanks.
Sounds like fun. Why don't you forward that information to our emails?
Okay.
We'll coordinate that. I don't think there will be a problem. So
we're just not supposed to reply all, right? And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Next is, let's see, Councillor Schuster.
Thank you. Attended the Planning Commission. They installed 2 new members. They had a regular meeting approving minutes and things like that, but didn't have any big items to report, such as developments or anything like that. Attended the Historical Railroad Depot meeting. They're severely affected by COVID. They are still having a couple of gatherings, and they make sure that they clean very, very good, and ask all participants who are using it to make sure that they're following all state regulations. And I'll kind of leave it right there.
I understand that the depot received a grant to backfill some of their losses. So.
Yes.
Okay.
At least they had applied for it. I did not hear either way.
I understand that they received it.
Good.
Okay. Council, on December 1st at 10:30 on the north side of the auxiliary gym is going to be the groundbreaking for the new Slade school.
And they're doing dirt work right now.
Yeah, they're moving dirt right now, but they're going to have, a ceremony, and of course all of you are invited to attend that. I'll be there, and hopefully you're going to be able to attend that. It's a big project for the city, and as you know, a lot of the discussion we had, you know, it intertwines with the progress that we're having here in the city. Now let's go to council comments. We'll go back to the same order that we started. Why don't we start with Vice Mayor Gabriel, and we'll work around the same way that we did. Any comments, Council Vice Mayor Gabriel?
No comments, thank you.
Councilor Weaver is not here. Councilor Harrington?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just really quick, I wanted to thank Janine for putting this on. I think it provides a really unique opportunity for the legislators to all at least know our faces when the session does come up and we need favors from them to try to keep us from going too far into the red. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that and tell Janine thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Stalder?
I have a couple of comments. One was just about the sale of the property to Encore Partners. And I've just heard some kind of discussion about maybe that it was quite a bit under the assessed value. And so I guess that's more of a question than a comment, but just that I've heard from constituents that they're concerned about that. That's about all. Thanks.
Okay. We'll go over the agenda in a few minutes and you'll see that that's on our agenda. Councilor Pierce?
No comments tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilor Doherty?
I just want to say I've also heard that, but also people calling about masks, asking us to enforce mask ordinance. Thank you.
Councilor Schuster?
Just going to make one comment. I attended Slade. So the original one that's still in working process. So I'll let you know how old it was. It wasn't new when I attended it.
Okay. All right. Let's now move on to the agenda review. If you'll grab your agenda, this shouldn't take, you know, there is the public hearing on the Encore Partners, which Councilor Stalder brought up, where there'll be a public hearing on that. Let me just say this. Obviously, we'll have the full discussion when it comes up on our agenda, but the amount that they came back to us with after we had agreed to look at their offer, we negotiated up quite a bit. And typically what we do is when we go into the approval of this, we don't do the negotiating. The negotiating is done by the team that we have authorized, which we did, to go in and work with them on something that would be for the city. And that will be presented to us when that item is introduced to us. On the consent agenda, I think, you know, we're going to have to, again, like we always do every year, agree on the distribution of the Wyoming Community Gas funding. And so that will be something that you need to look at. If you have any concerns on that, bring them up during pre-council or else move this to the regular agenda, because that's the distribution that's been suggested by the Finance Committee. On the taxis, there's 2 taxi licenses here. As probably all of you, it's pretty obvious that Lyft and Uber are not, they're not licensed. They're licensed by the state so that we can make sure that everyone's insured and doing everything properly. It'd probably be nice to be licensed by them, but that's just not what we do. So this is something that is common. Every year we renew licenses for taxi companies in Laramie. We have 2 new municipal court, what we call the magistrates. And I think that brings us up to 3. And this is just to give us relief for when our municipal judge is unable to attend court. And then also on the consent agenda, we're putting ordinance number 2019 on the third reading for the alcohol and rectifying manufacturing. And then again, this will be, I know you've given us input on the two meetings, the work session we have on the 22nd, and then the canceling the ward meetings on the 29th. So if you have thoughts on that, bring those up now, or else bring them up when we do the pre-council session there. Okay, before we jump into the regular, anything that we missed or that you want to talk about on the consent agenda? Let's go to the regular agenda. The regional airport, this is an amendment, and from what I understand, and Councillor Stalder could probably clarify this, they have reduced the ask that they have for us to fund them for the completion of their annual contract. But this is an amendment to the contract that we've offered, but because they received some funding from, I think, the state or the federal government, they've reduced the amount that they would have been asking for us for that. But that will be something that comes up in the discussion we have on the first item, item number 11.
I believe they're actually asking for a little bit more money. I can't see the whole thing, but this is.
Yeah, it's $23,000 or $24,000, but they had projected to be almost twice that much, and they've reduced it.
Yeah, it's definitely something good. It's for their tap fees so that they won't have any issues. They had to end up upgrading the water and sewer just for more bathrooms. So it's a very good thing.
Good, okay. The budget amendment, this is something, again, that is probably projected for later on in December, but it's just to wrap up the budget amendments. We had 3 last time. This will be the last one, and Jennifer Wade will be there to explain, the budget amendment here for Resolution 2020-70. Then Encore Partners, the approval of the sale, which has been negotiated by our staff team that's been working on that, which we will have to approve. Resolution 14, which is the bylaws. Now, as all of you know, that there was questions about, are we going to approve the bylaws before we do the third reading on the Traffic Commission? This answers that question, so we'll be able to look at that and wrap up, hopefully, the resolution and also the ordinance on the Traffic Commission. Any questions about that before we go to the next item? Okay, and then well, actually after that, then we just have the public comments and the rest of the meeting. There probably will be, it's not shown here yet, but there probably will be a executive session. There's some items that have come up that will probably be added to this. Now, our city attorney is not on the phone with us, but there's a good possibility we'll have something there regarding potential litigation.
Mayor, this is Janine. I can confirm there will be an executive session. I just confirmed attendance late this afternoon.
Okay, all right. So that'll be added to our agenda. Okay, anything on consent or regular agenda anyone has any questions about? Okay, we're going to go to public comment. Are there any public comments that anyone would like to make at this time? If so, unmute and you'll have 3 minutes. I don't see any. Do you see any, City Clerk? I do not. Okay, thank you. And so with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Happy Thanksgiving.
epic adventures start in Laramie, Wyoming. Surround your family with alpine vistas and high plains legends. And take a front seat to see the real West. Pristine wilderness adventures and relaxing with the best that nature has to offer makes hospitality a way of life. Laramie, Wyoming. That's why.
Get that four-wheeling, senses reeling, natural feeling. It's that time of year again. Time to unplug and connect with the great outdoors. This fall, bring your 4x4 to Laramie, Wyoming. Or rent a 4x4 and spend your autumn in awe. Plan your trip at visitlaramie.org. Laramie, Wyoming. That's why.